So it would be kind of embarrassing if I would have started this video without the radio actually working. As you can see, I've got a power supply hooked up. I've got the loop antenna on the side. I've replaced many parts, and this video will go through all of that, but let's throw the power on.
I get called up to her office and she says to me, "I can't pass you." And I said, "Why?"
So,
she says, "Well,
what have I done to the radio?
I think you have what it takes."
Nothing.
So she went into all
No alignment.
She says, "Here are your choices."
I haven't touched anything other than replacing the parts, checking things. So in this video, we'll go through that part of it and show you how I got to this point. And I've just thrown the switch. I put 65 volts on here, and it just came right up. There are some bad spots on the tuning dial. This is not the dial that came with it, by the way. This is one that I found in the junk box that fits on beautifully, loosely, so I can tune. A couple bad spots on the variable I've got to fix so I don't have some scratchiness, but the radio came back to life very easily. There are no dramatic, heroic action. I just put power on it and it came right up. So this video will go through restoring the electrical part of the radio. And there will be one more video where we get into building the little battery pack for it and the final restoration of the chassis and a simple alignment on the radio. So there will be one more video. So I'm in the middle of battle right now. That means I'm replacing parts. Got the soldering iron going. Most of the resistors are being replaced, and all of the paper capacitors are being replaced. I'll see if I can get away with the ceramic caps, and in some cases I'm even replacing some of the wire, which is very much damaged in some places because people have been in here before with soldering irons, and it melts the insulation of the wire. So trying to replace some of that as I can, and I am using sleeving, Teflon sleeving, all over the bottom, so that this only has to be done once for the next 25 or 30 years before it has to be all done over again. Also, I've made an annotated bottom picture that's got the capacitors and resistors in red, and I've got an improved schematic diagram that includes the part values as well as the reference designators. This is all very helpful when you're in the middle of this thing and can't figure out what's connected to what or what particular component you're looking at. So the final part just came in. It's the 2 microfarad capacitor. It's actually a 2.2 that's going to go into this spot right here. Once that baby is in, I'm going to buzz out the wiring. It's always a good thing to do before you pop in the tubes and apply power. So one thing I was a little bit concerned about is how was I going to attach to the battery connector. And I searched all over the shack in a bunch of boxes, and I found this lifesaver. It's a old-fashioned 4-pin female phenolic socket that fits it perfectly. And this is going to allow me to power the unit as well as become the foundation for the battery pack. Boy, am I glad I found that thing. I'm just getting ready to discard the old parts that I've taken out. The capacitors are already in the dust bin. I was looking at some of the parts more closely, and I found that that little electrolytic has a date on it. There we are, July of '49. So this radio would have been manufactured in late 1949. So am I going to buzz out the entire circuit diagram? No, but I am going to at least hit the high voltage points, and I will put the tubes in and see if I'm getting impedance. As I put each tube in, each filament should present a lower impedance for the meter. Anything that I soldered on the bottom I've inspected pretty well, but there's always a chance that somewhere along the line that you've done a miswire. So if you're really nervous, it probably is a good idea to go through the whole circuit and buzz it out. These trimmers here need to be moved. Probably a good idea to spray them with some contact cleaner and then just rock them. Basically, these trimmers haven't been moved in a long time, and oxidation can build up. We will do a full alignment on the radio, so don't worry about moving them into a place where it's not going to work at all. Sometimes these get stuck and oxidize, and people wonder why it doesn't work. Also hit the contacts on the variable capacitor and lubricate the bearings. Put some grease down here into the bearings of the variable capacitor. And I think we'll be trimming the IF cans as we go as well. So there's no need to touch those now. They look in pretty good shape, by the way. But getting close to applying power. Now, some of you may be wondering how I'm going to power up the radio. As I said, I've got this nice mating connector for the battery connector, and I'll be wiring that to my bench supply. The bench supply is set up to basically put out 1.5 volts for the filaments. Okay, 1.48, close enough. And I want to current limit it to something around an amp. So here's our current limit. Yeah, we'll set that for just below an amp. That's going to take care of the filaments. Now the high voltage over here, I've got a little power supply that has a regulated 80 volt output and a 25 volt output and a 6 volt output. I've taken one of those those pancake transformers that has 4 windings, and one winding I'm using as the primary, and then I've got another winding that I've rewound as the 6 volt secondary, and then another winding I have as a 25 volt output. So I've turned a dual primary, dual secondary pancake transformer into a multiple use transformer for this little power supply. 80 volts is a little bit high though. I don't want to run the radio on 80 volts. Let's see if I can get it to... I actually do have to turn it on. Okay. So, yeah, it's 81 volts. The radio would certainly operate on 81 volts perfectly, but I don't want to align it and tune it up on 81 volts because my battery supply is going to be somewhere around 65 volts. So I've got a little voltage divider here, and it's brought the voltage down to 61 volts. So it's a voltage divider. I like 60 volts. That's probably a good place to tune it up because the batteries won't take too long before they're down to that voltage. So I'm going to tune it up using 60 volts. So those are the 2 supplies I'll use to align the radio. Okay, listening to the old military radio net in the background. I'm now going to check the filaments. I've got the 1.5 volts on, so we go to pin 7, 1.4, just keep hitting these pin 7s, 1.4, just keep hitting those pin 7s. Okay, so the filaments are all good. The tubes can be plugged in there. Next thing I'm going to do is hook up the high voltage, and we'll check to see if the high voltage is on the appropriate pins. So I know this is a bit hard to see, but what I'm doing next, and remember I've buzzed out the line so I know I don't have short circuits. I'm applying the 60 volts to the set, and I'm going to check the pins on the various tubes to see that I'm at least getting the 60 volts. Now without anything running, I should get the full voltage. In other words, there shouldn't be voltage drops. Even if it's a 1 meg resistor hooked up to the 60 volts, you should see 60 volts at the end of that 1 meg resistor, because this meter has a pretty high impedance. So for instance, if we go on V1 pin 2, there should be 60 volts sitting there. First I have to find pin 2. I have marked the pins, and that really helps when you're searching in here. Let's see if I can get on some of these. Aha, pin 2. And yes, I have voltage on V1, pin 2, which is its plate. So you go on and on, check all of the pins from the top to make sure that you've got the voltages in the right place. And the next step will be hooking up the loop antenna again, and then we plug in the tubes and we see if we have the oscillators running. And remember, this is a very good indication that at least the plate side of the IF transformers are not open. You're not going to get any voltage on those plates if those coils happen to be open. So same with the output transformer. I wouldn't have seen any voltage on pin 2 and 6 of V4 if the output transformer wasn't okay on the primary side. So this is sort of the work as you go philosophy. And in this radio, the loop antenna and the plate that holds it in was detached completely. So you cannot align the set without the loop antenna attached because it's part of the L1 C1 tuning network, and that's how you bring in the stations. So you kind of have to have a tuned circuit out front. And if you attempted to substitute your own coil there or something like that, there would be no guarantee you'd have good tracking once you put it together with the real loop antenna. So I can attest that there's some repair work needed. You can see that crack going down through the bottom of that top cover. So I want to stabilize that because I'm going to try to get some glue down into it, and the best way to stabilize it is to put some tape on this inside. And at the same time, I want to be able to hold that loose loop antenna, which is flopping around now, in there securely. So that calls for something like double-sided tape or goo or glue or something like that, rubber boot glue, you know, the rubbery stuff. I don't like that goop, so I'm going to use a double-sided tape. I have a thin double-sided tape, and I have the thick VHB. The only problem with the VHB is once you put that in, it's not ever coming out again. So you better make darn sure that loop antenna works and you've got continuity. So that idea was pretty much a complete failure because the roughness of the loop, as well as the waxy substance that they put on the loop, prevented the double-sided tape from sticking. They were just dissimilar. Now I could go crazy and use some kind of a flexible glue, like a shoe glue, or you know, some of these high-tech glues like you know, the RTV-based glues and so on. But that's just going to cause a mess in there. Instead, because it is held down with a cover, which is also a non-conductor, I think I'm just going to simply use a very flexible kind of a tape, or even a rubberized tape, and double that up and just get the loop fairly stable in there like a sandwich. So I'm just going to go with the simple doubled up tape idea for the loop. Now I did, of course, keep the tape on that crack because I don't want the adhesive from the other side coming. Well, that actually worked. Just some doubled up tape was able to fix the loop into the lid. And now I will put the plastic part back up. We'll pull the wire tight and get those ends fastened. The screws that hold the plate on. And have to be careful there as well, not to crack the plastic in those holes. So it's looking a little bit better. I have temporarily affixed the loop antenna to the lid. As you can see, I'm using some 632 screws that are inappropriate, but I wanted to make sure that I could get 632s into the corners. And the way I did that was by heating the screw heads, and these are stainless steel screws, with my soldering iron, and then slowly turning them in effect tap the corner areas. Once I find appropriate black flathead screws that are a little more dainty, I'll put them in, and that'll dress out that panel. But it's safely in there now, and I'll be able to tune up the radio. Also, I had a big blemish right here, which was some tape that was stuck on the radio, and I was able to get that off by using this product, Never Dull, which is a wadding polishing product. Basically, the Never Dull allows you to take down paint even, and remove a layer, get you down to some fresh paint. And now the panel is beginning to look a little better, even without any painting.
Thanks for listening in to another Movers and Shakers segment. Code 4, Move and Shake in an area of you.
Well, least the lockdown to continue until 2022. So if Biden wants the lockdown to go on, they're going to go on with the lockdown.
Let's go on with the lockdown. We're going to lock down that last video where we go through the alignment of the set. We'll finish up any restoration, and finally we're going to build the little battery pack for it, and that should finish out the series on the Marconiphone.